This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and today we're going to deal with the topics of the Employee Handbook and potentially any additional documentation that you could have in operating your company. Now, with the mind of we're trying to build the best-in-class risk management department, ultimately so we can grow the value of our company. And today we've arrived at the Employee Handbook. Now, I work with many different small businesses and all different varieties, shapes, sizes, etc. And the Employee Handbook is one of those documents which some people have and some people don't. It's a document that I feel, based on my previous life, some experience I've had in the past, that the Employee Handbook can save your bacon if you get into some hot water. And it, to me, is a document that candidly you just should have. So let's deal with what is an employee handbook. Well, many times it may be called the employee manual or the staff handbook. Basically, it's a document outlining the rules, the policies, the procedures, the expectations that the company or you, the sole proprietor, has on your employees. It lists what the employees can expect from you. And so typically new hires are given the manual and a form to sign it saying they've read it and they agreed to abide by the terms. So that's basically what an employee handbook is. But why? Why in the world should we have an employee handbook? If you've listened to me for any length of time, you know that I'm a big proponent of building a best-in-class team, having a team on your bench which is deep, one that can create maximum horsepower for your company. To me, in order to do that, your team needs to understand what you're using to govern your company, what your business policies and rules are. So you want to create a handbook that outlines consistent and symmetrical and systematic. But anyways, you want to create a policy handbook that governs people's and treats everybody equally. And so you have the opportunity in a handbook to provide clear, concise rules that promote a positive, a safe, a productive work environment. You want to make sure that you're trying to get the work environment to where nothing is improper or harmful or harassment within the organization. You want to try to protect the company from, for example, sexual harassment issues, wrongful termination, and many types of discrimination lawsuits that you could potentially face as the owner. So now we talked about what is the employee handbook and why you should have it. What is actually in the employee handbook? So I have a copy of my employee handbook here in front of me. I'm looking at the screen right now, and I want to read you the table of contents that's in our employee handbook. So first of all, we have the code of conduct, and it deals with the business conduct, conflicts of interest, confidentiality information, what we deal with drug and substance control and alcohol abuse policies. We deal with sexual harassment and various other type of harassments. We deal with workplace violence. We deal with the computer policy, the internet policy, the false information policy, and the enforcement by not following the code of conduct. So it begins with basically the code of conduct. Then we go into the various company policies that deal with business hours, the attendance. Attendance can be pros or cons for some people. Inclement weather. If it snows a sugar drop in Tennessee, we all of a sudden have inclement weather. If it gets below 20 degrees, all of a sudden we have inclement weather. Well, whenever you have a team that you're trying to work with and they drive in from various locations, it can cause problems. So you have to outline how that's going to be handled. We deal with the progression of discipline, the policy there. We deal with dress code. All that comes in place in the various company policies. You deal with additional employment information like, hey, look, we're going to have a direct deposit for your paycheck. You're going to outline what a notice of absence is going to be. If you're going to be late, if you're going to be away, how do you notice people? Where do you park? When do you take breaks? Is there a training period? What is that? What happens at the front desk? What happens on the telephone? Are cell phones allowed in the office? Are cell phones allowed in the work? What do you do with office supplies? Who orders them? How are you supposed to handle them? What about employee records? Are those kept confidential? Can you make sure your employees know that their personal information is protected? What happens if you end up having to terminate somebody? So all those are dealt with the various employment related aspects, things that deal specifically with the employee. You may get into company benefits like a leave of absence, short-term disability, long-term disability, bereavement. What happens when jury duty comes up? You got to deal with that. Unpaid days, personal sick days, salaries, bonuses, all those things come into play in our employee handbook. Now, you say, Justin, it sounds like you got a pretty exhaustive one. I went out on the interweb and I pulled up some lists of some things that may or may not need to be in your employee handbook. So they're going to sound somewhat repetitive, but it will give you an idea of what types of topics an employee handbook deals with. So one of the things that you're automatically going to see is equal employment opportunity. You're trying to deal with the anti-discrimination issues. You're going to have anti-harassment, anti-retaliation. You're going to deal with at-will nature. We talked about that last episode. I said Tennessee is an at-will type of an employment state. It will have a code of conduct. There's going to be general employment information. You're going to deal with safety and security. I was working with a church in a different city than where I'm located. And we were talking about safety policies and, with the spree of violence that has occurred in various churches around the country and how churches are often targeted, this church wanted to make sure they had a safety policy in place for their employees of this organization. And so that may be something you need to have in your particular company if you're an indoor area. Our office is in a bank. We actually have a bank beneath us. And not too long ago, the bank was robbed. So there was procedures that went into place in that scenario. You may have pay policies. Again, we talked about benefits, sick leave, pay vacation. What about family medical leave? What happens if somebody's aunts or uncles or moms or dads? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the promotions and raises? How can someone file a complaint and feel like their job's not going to be threatened? You're going to lay that out. You're going to deal with your disclaimers. You're going to have welcome letters potentially from the CEO saying, hey, welcome to the team. If you're reading this, looks like you're coming on board. You may have a company culture idea, something we don't have in our employee handbook. I don't have anything that talks about our company culture. I should probably. We don't have anything that talks about the company mission statement. I know many companies do. Ours is on our website, but maybe you need to put something out there in your handbook that drives a theme throughout the entire process for your new employees. You're going to deal with behavioral expectations. We talked about dress code. We talked about the standard operating hours. We talked about progressive discipline, what that looks like. So for many business owners, we've really just never taken time to think about where or how we govern our companies. Yeah, we've looked at it from a legal perspective of the operating agreement or maybe employment contracts, as we talked in recent episodes. But how do you deal with all employees, including if you're an employee of the company yourself? How do you deal with it? Well, that's where the employee handbook comes into play.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
You're like, man, Justin, I know we got operating agreements for the company, and now you're talking about employment agreements, and now we got a handbook. What other documents do you have to provide? There may be a list of documents, depending on your industry, depending on your type of business, that are not covered in your employee handbook or your policy manual. In our world, for example, the financial securities world, there are several additional documents that we have to have that the employees of our organization must know. I call it the Bible, is what I call it. I say, guys, you got to know this. This is the Bible for our company. You have to know these things. For our company, we have a thing called a compliance manual. Let me tell you, the compliance manual deals with what we can and can't do. It deals with client confidentiality. It deals with cybersecurity. It deals with trading. It deals with so much information that the government, either through FINRA, which stands for the Financial Institution Regulatory Association, or perhaps the Securities and Exchange Commission that we often talk about as the SEC, or maybe even through our state securities regulators, they require us to follow a set and sort of rules. So in our type of business, we have to have a compliance manual. Maybe your company is not dealing specifically with the state. Maybe you're dealing with a different type of organization. Another thing we have to have is we have to have a code of ethics. We have to have a code of ethics that meets the regulators' approval, or at least maybe not their approval, might not be the right word, that meets their standards, probably a better word for that. So we have to have a code of ethics. And this is different than the code of ethics of the operating of the company. We have to have privacy policies because we deal with people's money and their lives. In our world, we have to deal with what's called outside business activities. We have documents that the team has to abide by with outside business activities. We call them OBAs in the financial world. We have to have social media policies. We have so many different policies that are set forth for consumer protection, and I don't think any of them are waste. I think they all have a validity to their purpose, but nonetheless, we have to deal with those. And so whenever you're setting up employee governing documents, I always believe that the employee handbook should be at the center, at the epicenter, if you want to go there, at the very hub, the stake in the ground that's a mile deep of how you're going to operate the company. It provides a lot of cohesiveness between you, the employer, and the team who is going to help you grow the value of your organization. And if in your industry, much like mine, you have another set of requirements that are placed on you through some regulatory body, due to some type of a licensure they hold, due to a particular, I've got clients that work in the medical field. They have their own policies and procedures. I have clients that do contract work for the government. That's security related, I should say, not like securities in so much stocks and bonds, but dealing with government defense is probably a better word to say it. So in each of those areas, you're going to have different things which govern your clients. Ultimately, why does it matter that you have documents in place to govern the way employees are treated? I'm going to pull it down to one thing: risk management. See, if you do not have the proper governing documents in place, ultimately you're creating an unnecessary risk for the organization, for the company at large, to where a savvy employee, who means perhaps nefarious activities, could come in and create an issue that turns into a litigation issue, or just something happens. You know, business owners aren't perfect. They're human. Maybe just something wasn't right. You said something wrong. I know a lady who was fired because she made a comment about the way a person dressed. Fired because she made a comment about the way a person dressed. I know an individual who was fired because they made a comment about a coworker and the way they looked. All that is covered in a very good employment manual. And you're trying to protect the company. Then the individual who was fired because they made a comment about the way somebody was dressed, the company, right or wrong. And I mean, we could argue the fact that some people just do things just because they stepped overboard in the PC culture we live in. But ultimately, they were trying to protect the company from civil litigation. And so that's the reason why these things are here. It's here to provide a culture, is the word I want to use, a culture which is harmonious and one that is going to help drive a value in your organization. So I'll leave you that today and those basic documents. Again, you may have some different ones. Hey, look, check out the Financially Simple blog. We have been working very hard to update the blog. We are releasing all the podcast episodes. We got behind with our initiative on our book, and our team is working hard to catch up the blog with all of the written formats and all the graphs and everything we deal with on the podcast. Check it out, financialsimple.com. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter. We had probably 3, 4, maybe 5 comments in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. I mean, we get comments all the time, various locations, but someone commented recently, said, "Man, Justin, you're the only newsletter that I read." Now, I thought it was cool. I was humbled, but I was really more humbled because of who this was. This is one of the top tax attorneys that I'm aware of in my sphere of influence. And just to have that tax attorney say, "Hey, look, Justin, you're the one newsletter that I read," I thought that was really cool. Not only that, but I've recently had retirees who say, "Man, Justin, I like your newsletter. This is really cool writing." So check out the newsletter. Sign up there on the website, financiallysimple.com. You can see it on the right-hand side where it says sign up for our newsletter. If you like the podcast, do me a favor, share it with a friend. That's the way that we get our exposure out. Go on iTunes, wherever you're at, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us on, maybe Podbean, and leave us a review. Tell me what you like about it. Do me a favor. If you don't like something about it, shoot me an email, justin@financiallysimple.com. We're getting ready to start our next series here before too long, and I'm going to change the show up a little bit to try to make it a little bit more, not so much teaching, but more news and entertainment. Let me know your thoughts on that if you like that idea. So justin@financiallysimple.com. Hey, look, like I say every week, life is hard, life is good, and life can be frustrating. Money doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all go out and make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple Podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.